Aircraft development. Someone read the second one, right here.
Army Aviation Branch.
All right, someone read the third one for me, young lady over there. Is that TH?
-67 and OH-58.
Yep, those are helicopters. So, three big things came out of Fort Rucker caused by, either during or related to the Cold War. Aircraft development. Before the Cold War, you had what major war did we have before the Cold War? Or before the whole Cold War era? All right, how about after between World War II and
Cold War.
what did we have?
Korean War.
Vietnam.
I said.
Vietnam was one of the largest air battles, conflict, where the helicopter was the primary use. Y'all seen all the Vietnam movies?
Oh yeah.
You've got the Huey helicopter with the soldiers kind of hanging off the side,
Yeah.
or they're doing medevac or anything like that. That was the Huey helicopter. Anyway, the combat operations in Vietnam was the first time that we used helicopters in such a large way. Before then, there really was not a use for them in combat. So, after Vietnam and leading up to the Cold War era, the Army developed multiple aircraft and after Vietnam because they realized how important they were. So they have 4 different kind of helicopters that we'll look here at the end. You have a utility helicopter, which picks stuff up and carries people. You have a cargo helicopter, which is a huge one that you can drive vehicles onto the helicopter, inside of it, and it'll transport cargo. You have the observation helicopter, which is that one on the bottom right, which is what I flew. And then you have an attack helicopter, which is the Apache, and they're all about destroying targets. So that's why, you see where it says TH?
Yes.
That's a training helicopter, and the model number is 67. OH is a observation helicopter, and the model is 58. So that's, if you ever see helicopter nomenclature like that, then you'll know there's training helicopters, observation helicopters, attack helicopters, utility, and
Cargo helicopters.
cargo. You got it. The Army Aviation Branch, I mentioned this before. There was no Army Aviation Branch until 1983. The Army Air Corps was totally separate from the Army, but then they decided, you know what, they did such a good job in Vietnam that we want to make aviation part of the Army. So, as a branch of the Army, you have infantry, armor, which is tanks. You've got field artillery, which is cannons. You've got air defense artillery, which are missiles that shoot down airplanes. Those are just to name a few, and you have aviation. There's several more, but those are just kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about when we say a branch of the Army. Does that make sense? So aviation has been around for over 100 years, but as part of the Army, as a branch, it's only been around for about 30-so years. The TH-67, which these are the 2 helicopters I flew. I flew that. Everyone flies that at flight school. That was developed out of the Cold War. The arms race, the Army decided we need to develop more pilots. This is the aircraft we're going to use to train them. And then that aircraft, specifically the observation helicopter I flew, came out of, was developed during that arms race. Any questions on that? Awesome. I'm going to stop talking here in a second, and I'll show you a bunch of pictures and videos. All right. Anybody remember the name of this?
That's
TH-67. What does that look like?
Pool.
Looks like a pool. What do you think they're going to do?
They're going to drop you in there while
All right. In that picture, they're teaching pilots in training, dunker training. They're teaching you how to survive if you crash in the water. They'll drop you down the water, roll you over, buckled into your seat, and you have to hold your breath and quickly, without being able to see in the dark, unbuckle and get oriented and find your way out of that.
What if I die?
I'm so scared.
You see those 2 guys on the back? Those are divers and they're instructors. They're there to make sure you don't.
What do they do if you don't come up?
They get you out. So, all right, I'm going to show you a couple of videos, right? We're just going to be able to look at them just for a second. The first one, we got one on flight school. This is a video that someone's wife took of them flying at one of the airfields. I wanted you guys just to see what it looks like. Has anyone ever driven down to the beach and seen one of those white and orange helicopters flying around? Because we would land in farms and fields and all this other stuff. So if you're ever down there in South Alabama, during the morning or afternoon, you'll normally see them flying around. I think our speakers are up.
Hey guys, you've got to see this. Hey, it's Mike, and we're at my home right now, and you're probably wondering about the...
He doesn't go to flight school. We'll just watch about a minute or two of this. It's not the best footage. This is coming in for a running landing. Normally you come in and just sit down real nice and easy. They're doing emergency procedures, and if you ever have to come in like an airplane, that's what they're doing right now. Coming in a little hot. That's practicing an emergency procedure because the helicopter shouldn't come in, slide, it should come in and just touch down. Now you see a bunch of different helicopters. That's what it looks like on a regular day. You go down, you're on the runway, you call out to the radio tower, and you go and you do your lap or your traffic pattern, you do your procedures, and you come back and land. So you just got a bunch of activity like that going over and over and over. Each day you train on something different. Take off for a pilot, really nice and smooth. We'll look at one more landing. Pretty cool, huh?
Yep. Thing to do is in a helicopter when you're learning. You guys are smart.
No,
Is this the you what?
We just saw the next one.
You're
No, but I bet you seen it.
intuitive. Hovering is the most difficult thing. Hover is when you pick the aircraft up about 3 feet off the ground and you just sit there, just not moving. You're not going forward, you're not going backwards, you're not going left, you're not going right, you're just still. You would think that that would be the easiest thing because you're not doing anything, but it's very difficult. All right, let me see if I can borrow this. All right, you're sitting in your seat. You have 2 pedals. All right, the tail rotor, which is the very back of the helicopter, that moves your tail left and right. So your feet are controlling the rotor that's 12 feet behind you. All right, that will help you rotate left and right. Does that make sense? You have the cyclic, which is we'll call it the joystick in the middle, that you see when you see people flying airplanes or anything like that, they've got that little stick in the middle with all the buttons on it. that moves the rotor system, so that'll push you forward, it'll make you go back, you can bank right and bank left. Then you have this other stick over here called the collective, and that's all your power. So you got to coordinate your right hand, your left hand, and both feet every time you even think about moving the helicopter. So to hover is a very important time because you're in the middle of sitting there doing nothing and moving towards flying, right? So to pick it up, you don't just pick it up and sit there. You're constantly just barely, like if you were looking at me, you probably couldn't tell I was moving it because you're barely just little pressure, but it's a constant adjustment in motion. So I'm going to show you a funny video. It's only 20 seconds. It's not the best one I've ever seen because there are some that are hilarious, but this one is a flight student trying to hover for the first time.
Does it show you the sun?
No, it shows you from the outside. They shouldn't be moving at all. See how they're up and down, left and right. That's exactly what I did the first time. Except mine was more like, see, they got it under control finally. My first time went something like this. Finally, the instructor pilot had to grab the controls before I wrecked this. All right, Dunker training. Dunker training is to help you survive if you just so happen. When they train the pilots, they think of everything, right? They think of flying across country, flying in combat, taking off, landing. If you happen to crash, if your engine goes out, if you lose the blade, they think of everything. So you go through, that's why it takes so long to go through the training, because they want to make sure you can do everything. Dunker training is just to make sure that you can survive if you were to have a crash over water. All right, so I'm going to show you just a little bit of that.
That is surprising, right? Droid's actually a regulator.
That's an instructor that just jumped in. You're seated with your helmet and your uniform on, boots and everything, seat belted in. Then they flip you over, and you've got to get out. You've got no mask, you're having to hold your breath the entire time. It takes a while for one of them. I started getting short of breath while I was watching it this morning. Anybody getting nervous yet?
No.
There's one. I think there's four. There's two. There's three. Hear him coughing? And there's the fourth one. When you flip over like that, water just goes all up in your nose and your sinuses. And for about 2 or 3 days, your nose and your whole face is hurting because of the pressure. Who thinks they could do that?
I go swim. I don't swim.
That's awesome because I had them bring a Dunker tank here with us today. So after class, we're going to go. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm about to get heavy. Did you do that too?
Yes, I did all this.
I'll
Here's one a little bit that they did that's a little more